Hey everybody, it's Rico, founder of Offplan.One, where we build Cyprus's future together. And today I'm here in my living room, a little bit of a different video, sit down as in the old times. Why? Because there is a big change coming for Cyprus real estate, and this is relevant for everyone that is thinking about buying a property here in Cyprus. So, if you've been thinking about buying a property here in Cyprus, especially a bigger house or maybe even a villa, then you have 4 months left to buy a house with 5% instead of 19% VAT. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then I'm going to give you a little backstory, because every property in Cyprus, every new property that you buy here is plus VAT, and the standard VAT rate is 19%. But there is a special 5% VAT scheme which allows you to buy your first property for just 5% VAT. And the old rules were that this house can be up to 200 square meters as well as no price limit. So the house or the villa could be as expensive as you wish. The only two requirements were, number one, it must be your first primary residence, or if you bought a property more than 10 years ago, then you could apply for the 5% VAT every 10 years. And the second requirement is that you must live in that property or actually not rent it out for 10 years. So this is exclusively for properties that you or your family will live in, not for investment properties that you will rent out. Now, as there was no real price limit, a lot of high net worth individuals used this 5% scheme for their luxury mansions. A 2 million seafront property or a huge mansion in the mountains with golden interior, which is cool, don't get me wrong, but the EU didn't like that, and so they pressured Cyprus to reform this 5% VAT scheme, and they came up with a reform. In June 2023, they announced the VAT reform, which created a transitional phase. All Cyprus developers had time until October 2023 to submit projects that will still qualify for the 5% VAT until June this year, in less than 4 months. Properties that were submitted before this deadline can still enjoy the 200 square meters and no price limit rule. But, and this is the important part of this video, only until June 15th this year, because after that only the new rules apply to all properties in Cyprus. And those are the new rules. So the 5% reduced VAT still exists, but it comes with stricter limits. And those are, number one, the 5% VAT is now only applicable on the first 130 square meters. Every square meter after that will be taxed with 19% VAT. And we will look at examples in a minute to see what actual price difference this makes. But we also need to keep in mind that the total property size can now be just a maximum of 190 square meters, while the value of the eligible 5% is limited to 350,000 euros. Bear with me, you will understand what that means in a minute. First, the probably biggest change is the price cap of 475,000 euros. This is now the maximum price what the property can cost to be eligible for the 5%. If the property costs more than 475k, then 19% applies to the whole property. And to understand this a little bit better, let's look at two examples that are very common here in Cyprus, and that is example number one, a 160 square meter house. This is a beautiful 3-bedroom villa here in Cyprus, very close to the sea, an amazing sea view, communal pool, maybe a spa, and overall a very good quality. For example purposes, we are now using a price of 450,000 euros, even though I would say this is a price of more like 2 years ago. Such properties today go for a little bit more, but let's keep it simple. And we also need to know that the developer submitted the permits after October 2023. So now we are talking about the new rules first. As this property is below 475k, the reduced VAT still applies, but only partially. And now we are getting into the calculation. So, as we learned, the first 130 square meters are applicable for the 5%. And what we need to do now is to cross-calculate the price of the first 130 square meters, which in this example is around 284k. And this leads to a payable VAT of approximately 14,200 euros. The remaining 30 square meters, because the property is, as we know, 160 square meters, will be taxed at 19%. So we do the cross calculation again, and the payable VAT on the remaining 30 square meters is 31,400 euros approximately, which we can see, even though it is so much less square meters, the payable VAT is so much more. This leads to a total payable VAT on this 160 square meters as per new rules of 45,687 euros. But now it's getting interesting, because what if the developer submitted the permits before October 2023? And as we see, the 5% VAT applies now on the full property, which leads to a payable VAT of just 22,500 euros, because there is not this 130 square meters limit. This leads to a price difference of 23,000 euros, which is actually pretty remarkable. But that's not even the craziest part, because now let's look at example number 2, a 190 square meters villa with a price point of 900,000 euros. So we are talking about a luxury bespoke detached villa with an unobstructed sea view, everything private, amazing interior, 3, 4, maybe even 5 bedrooms depending on the title deeds, and the developer submitted the permits before October 2023. So basically the exact type of villas that the EU didn't like. Anyway, the VAT calculation today. So if you would buy this property today, then the full 190 square meters will still qualify for the 5% VAT, because we have the 200 square meter limit and no price limit. The payable VAT on this luxury property of 900,000 euros is 45,000 euros, compared to the VAT that you will pay after June 15th this year, because June 15 marks the deadline for the new size and price limits. And even though this villa is actually within the 190 square meters size limit, it is not within the price limit, because it is worth more than 475,000 euros, which leads to the crazy fact that this entire property will now be taxed at 19% on every single euro. And the payable VAT will then be an astonishing 171,000 euros. And if we compare this to the 45,000 euros, we quickly see the huge price difference of 126,000 euros for the same villa. The only difference is when you will buy the property, or rather when you will reserve it. And this is kind of the reason why I wanted to do this video on this channel, just because I wanted to warn people that are actually interested in Cyprus, whether they want to relocate here, buy a property here, to just act fast if you're actually interested in that, because again, this will happen after June 15th. To all properties. And so this leads to the question, what does this actually mean for the Cyprus real estate sector in general? And my assumptions are, number one, because of the fact that there will be no more villas with 5% VAT, the remaining 5% VAT villas that are still on the market until June 15th with the permissions applied before October 23, there will be huge demand for those last villas, and after that there will be more renters and fewer buyers for such prestigious properties. I think this will create kind of its own market, like Bel Air, let's say, or just the areas where there will be a lot of luxurious properties and just a few people will actually own those properties and more people will rent it, because why should I buy a property worth 2 million if I can just rent it for 20,000 euros per month, something like that, and then just buy a medium-sized house or a penthouse, whatever it is. Obviously, there will always be a handful of buyers that just want the best property on the island, but I think it will be just much more niche from now on. And at the same time, medium-sized houses, as they have the split VAT with the 5% and 19% VAT, the average house sizes will actually be reduced by the developers, because they know, well, if our clients have the option between 5 and 19%, why don't we just make the houses smaller and cheaper, and we create bungalows, maybe 2-bedroom houses, and then we have somewhat an easier way to sell them. But this then also will create a limited supply, because most people will opt for this option just as the apartments, because most of the apartments actually remain ineffective. I think the developers will focus much more on apartment complexes now, and there will be a much higher demand for apartments that will qualify for the 5% on the whole property price. So that about the most important information I would say that you need to know for the upcoming 5% VAT reform here in Cyprus, specifically for off-plan properties. And as we saw, it is not that easy with all the cross calculations and all that. So the most important question now is, what should you do now if you want to come to Cyprus, if you are here, or if you're thinking about buying a property? Number one, if you are sure that you want to stay in Cyprus long term, I would suggest to act fast, especially for medium-sized houses and big villas. If you ever thought about owning a property here in Cyprus, definitely make sure to get an individual consultation call rather quickly. This leads to number two. Maybe it makes sense for you to buy a house instead of paying rent, because you could also, if you do not have the cash, apply for a loan and just pay the bank instead of paying your landlord and make him rich. I mean, owning a property also strengthens your tax residency, by the way. If you're coming from a high tax jurisdiction, Central Europe, the Nordics, Scandinavia, UK, then it is a very strong substance proof that you can provide to your tax authorities in your home country that you own a property here in Cyprus and you actually shifted your life center to Cyprus. And the next point is actually something I can't wrap my head around, because if we look at all this, what this actually means is a guaranteed capital appreciation. I mean, think about it. On June 15th, all properties worth more than 475k are factually 14% more expensive. This means if you buy a property on June 14th, 2 days later you already made a 14% ROI, because no one else will be able to buy this property for 5%. And so I believe that the Cyprus real estate market becomes more expensive in general, yes, because of the 5% VAT reform, but also because of so many other reasons, such as overall market demand, just a huge influx of people relocating here to the island, entrepreneurs, families, companies and all that. I mean, you literally see what is happening on my social media. And so if you're interested in getting a consultation call with us, definitely make sure to reach out to us on Offplan.One, fill out the form, we will get back to you. And if you like to see more videos about Cyprus, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.